Sorry about that. My alarm went off, so my camera shut off. So if you see if the video cuts, you have to bear with me as my alarm went off, and whenever my alarm goes on, my camera cuts off. That's excuse me. This is still part two. This is part two of my video, obviously. I'm not gonna say part three because it's pretty much still the same video as my last part. My camera just cut. So this is part two of my chapter three read along of Lord of the Rings. I'll babble on for, I don't know, 10 minutes and I'll start reading. I know it's fun when I babble, but like I'll babble on for a good 10 minutes and I'll start reading Lord of the Rings. Which is interesting. I'll read 10 pages today. 8 to 10. I'll do 10 pages. I'll read 10 pages today, and then tomorrow I'll continue. I'll finish off chapter three, and I'll start chapter four the following day. Because I'll do my very best, Lord of the Rings fans, to get through all of book one. That way, I even read half of Fellowship of the Ring to us on YouTube, which is pretty cool. Yeah, and that way I can draw all you guys who haven't read the book. What you guys now get an idea of what the Lord of the Rings book is about, because I read you the prologue, chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3 so far. Obviously, you guys get a glimpse of the world that J.R.R. Tolkien created. As J.R.R. Tolkien created a masterful world. His world building is even better than my world. The world building of Last of Us is good, but it's not as good. It's not as good as what? It's not as good as what? The world building of Last of Us is not as good as Lord of the Rings, but it's a better story. Last of Us has a better story. Lord of the Rings has better world building, obviously. So to all you fans, though, I'm giving you a heads up. Do not expect Last of Us to have better world building than Lord of the Rings, as it does not. I don't think any book can top Lord of the Rings world building, but it has a better story, and it's a more interesting story. Whereas Lord of the Rings, in my opinion, the books are pretty boring. Don't hate on me, Lord of the Rings fans. I'm just stating my opinion here. For me personally, the books are pretty boring. I'm almost halfway. I'm on book 6. I'm on the final part. I'm about halfway through Return of the King. Close to halfway through Return of the King. The book is good, but there's a lot of sections in the book that are boring. Whereas I read my book and a lot of sections. J.R.R. Tolkien did not keep me hooked the way Last of Us is. Trust me, once you read my book, you'll finally see what I mean. Once you get the print in your mail, or you buy the ebook, you read on your laptop, you order some takeout. I'm gonna take you for a ride. All you fancy nerds, you're all gonna order takeout. You're gonna binge volume 1, binge volume 2. In 3 days, you're gonna binge the whole book, man. You'll binge all volume 1 the first day. The second day, you'll binge all of volume 2, and the third day, you'll binge all of volume 3 with some takeout, man. Because Last of Us is that good of a story. Trust me, once you think I'm crazy now, but once you read it, I'm gonna take you for a ride. And you're gonna be like hooked. Oh my god, this story is amazing. And once you finish Last of Us, you're finally gonna be like, oh my god. You're finally gonna be like, oh my god, Last of Us is actually better than Lord of the Rings. Whereas even though J.R.R. Tolkien had amazing world building, J.R.R. Tolkien did not keep me hooked the way Ivan O'Mara does. Ivan O'Mara kept me way more hooked than J.R.R. Tolkien because I have the gift, obviously. J.R.R. Tolkien has the gift too, obviously. He was able to create an amazing world. As you to create a world of Lord of the Rings, you have to be gifted. But Ivan O'Mara is also gifted as he wrote an amazing story. Entertaining, amazing story. A masterpiece. I wrote a masterpiece worth billions. As I told you, Last of Us is $1 billion story. Even if I wasn't the son of God, I'd be rich. If I wasn't the son of God and I wrote this book, the news of this book would travel worldwide like Harry Potter, and I would be the next J.K. Rowling or Stephen King. I would be fucking rich. So even if I wasn't the son of God, I'd be fucking loaded, man. I'd be rich. Because I'm the son of God, obviously the whole world's gonna buy my book, obviously, because I'm special. I have the keys also, right? But at the same time, it's also the best story ever told. Best fantasy story ever told. Best fantasy story ever told, right? Because I'm talking about fantasy here. Last of Us is the best fantasy story ever told. It's literally $1 billion story. There's no story like it. It's a unique story. Going on 5 minutes, y'all. Babble on for another 5 minutes. And all those Hollywood actors, once they read my book, they're all going to be like, oh my god, I can't wait to be a part of this amazing story. I can't wait for Ivan to bring this life on the big screen, unheard of budget. Eric Tapin Del So I can't wait to be a part of this amazing story. And all those Hollywood actors, they're all going to envy those actors chosen for Zanes. Oh my god, you guys are fucking lucky. You get to be a part of this amazing story. Because everyone, all the Hollywood celebrities are all going to read my book. They're all going to be like, oh my God, you actors are so lucky. You get to be a part of this amazing Last of Us Alien story. I wish I could be a part of this story. Be a part of this unheard of billion-dollar budget movie. Eric being the devil himself. This amazing story with the North, the South, the Southerns, the Northerns. You guys already know. I already gave you an in-depth detail of my book. You guys know the in-depth, the ins and outs of my book. I made videos about this. But you guys now understand, if I adapt this kind of movie, this kind of book to the big screen, you're looking at the best story ever told. Yes, even better than Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. If it's done right, you pull out a lot of money into it. You don't pull a lot of money into it, it will not be better than Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings is a very hard series to top. Obviously, I'm gonna keep saying this. So to all you guys, I don't want to be like, I don't want to be cocky and say no. Like, last of things, if you don't put a lot of money into it and you don't write a good script, you don't hire the right people, the movie will be okay, but it will not be better than. I can't see it beating Lord of the Rings. Whereas if you put unheard amount of money into it, like unheard of horror, action sequences, world building, and you write a good script, you hire the right people to write a good script, then you're looking at a better movie than Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. You're looking at something unheard. If you have Eritaz as the devil himself, obviously, then and unheard of world building like 8K World, unheard of action, you're looking at a better movie than Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. That's how good Last of Us is. And I told you, there's a 40% chance I'll hire Peter Jackson. There's a good chance if I end up choosing those two, I'll most likely end up choosing Mel Gibson. I don't know. I don't know who I'll choose. Peter Jackson's a good candidate too, obviously. Peter Jackson's also good too, so it's hard to choose between those two. But I'll have them, if I end up choosing to hire a director, I'll have those two compete for the job. I'll ask them a series of questions. So I'll fly them on my private jet to Vancouver, and me and my wife will interview them. We'll ask them all these questions, and whoever comes up with the most satisfying answer, that director will be the lucky director who will be hired on board. And one of those guys, if they're hired, will get to direct my Last of Us movie. And I'll give them full control for directing. And they're going to be the lucky ones who are going to be able to direct my movie. And Peter Jackson and Mel Gibson will obviously love to direct my movie. As once you read my book, you'll finally see what I mean. Last of Us is the best story ever told. As Peter Jackson and Mel Gibson would obviously love to direct my movie, because you're looking at the best story ever told, man. That's why those actors are going to beg. Even those two directors, if one of them are hired, even those guys are going to beg and want to re-sign them. Because what? Because what? Because Geist is a top-notch company, man. And Last of Us is the best story ever told. Hence why Mel Gibson's really, really good, because Passion Christ is like a scary movie. You have Satan as demons in the movie. Remember how you got that demon baby? You got that demon woman who was Satan. You got that horror and Passion of Christ. Obviously. You also have the story of Jesus. Hence why Mel Gibson is really, really good for Last of Us. Well, Peter Jackson is also good because you have the fantasy world building of Lord of the Rings. Hence why they're both good directors, obviously. They're both good directors. Right. Hence why I don't know who to choose between Peter Jackson and Mel Gibson. My heart's telling me Mel Gibson. My brain's telling me Peter Jackson. Obviously. Like my gut's telling me I should hire Mel Gibson, but then my brain's telling me I should hire Peter Jackson. Obviously, right? Because it's hard to choose between those two guys because they're both what? They're both very talented directors, obviously. But Mel Gibson has more consistency with his movies. Hence why he's my heart's telling me to go with Mel Gibson, because Mel Gibson has Passion of Christ, he has Braveheart. He has Hacksaw Ridge. He did so many good movies that were good movies. Whereas Peter Jackson, he's only known for Lord of the Rings, pretty much. Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. Like King Kong was not bad, but Peter Jackson's only known for Lord of the Rings, pretty much. Hence, Mel Gibson has a bit more consistency. Hence, with his movies. Hence why I believe Mel Gibson's a good candidate. But Peter Jackson also did Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is an amazing trilogy. Hence why he's also a good candidate, obviously. Right. So think about it. So you know how you had the demons in Passion of Christ? Well, think of something like that for Zanes. They're devils, like Eritaz and all of them are devils. Except the world is like Lord of the Rings. The world isn't ancient times like Jesus. No. The world looks like Lord of the Rings, the demons that the devils and demons that you saw in what in Passion of Christ, like, you know what I'm saying, that demon baby. Think something like that for the one, like Pennywise the clown for the demon wolves and bats. And that's why Last of Us Angels will be the best story ever told in motion picture. And both Peter Jackson and Mel Gibson will obviously love to direct my movie, because you're looking at it. Once they read my book, you'll see what I mean. They'll be like, oh my god, like, this is the best story ever told. I would love to direct this movie. This you adapt this picture, you're looking at an amazing adaptation. Best story ever told. I'll say this. I'm not going to say it'll be the best. I'll say this. It'll either be one of the best movies ever made or the best movie ever made. Just like my Last of Us Angels book is the best fantasy novel ever written, but it's not the best book ever written, as you can't compare fantasy with romance and science fiction. No, Last of Us Angels is the best fantasy novel ever written. Some people will disagree with me. There's some people who might like Brandon Sanderson's Way of Kings better. By the way, go on his YouTube channel, Brandon Sanderson. You can watch all his videos there. He also has sessions, in-class sessions, where he teaches on writing. You can find it all on YouTube. Go on his Brandon Sanderson YouTube page. Yeah, you're welcome. I'm throwing your book out there. You want to buy his Stormlight series, you can purchase it online on Amazon, whatever it is. Get his Way of Kings book series, his Stormlight series. Yeah, you're welcome, Brandon Sanderson. I'm promoting your book out there. Where there's some people who might like Brandon Sanderson's Way of Kings, Patrick Rothfuss, Name of the Wind. Yeah, you're welcome. I'm promoting your book out there. Patrick Rothfuss, Name of the Wind. You know what I'm saying? George R. Martin's Game of Thrones. J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. There's some people who might like those books better than Zane's, but I highly doubt it. As Last of Us Zane's will keep you more hooked than all those books. It's a better written story than all those books. The fact that it's better than... I'm reading Lord of the Rings right now. I went over my Last of Us Zane's book. Last of Us Zane's kept me a lot more hooked. I wouldn't be this cocky if my book wasn't this good. Last of Us is a better written story than Lord of the Rings. If it's a better written story than Lord of the Rings, chances are it's a better story than Name of the Wind, Way of Kings, Harry Potter, Game of Thrones. Is better than all those books, as even those books can't top Lord of the Rings. There's some people who like Brandon Sanderson and George R. Martin's books better than Lord of the Rings, but that's very rare. Most of the fantasy community, the fantasy nerds, the fantasy book nerds, they all say, yeah, J.R.R. Tolkien's a god of fantasy. No fantasy book can top Lord of the Rings, because Lord of the Rings is that good, except for Last of Us Zane's. Once they read my book, they're probably going to be like, yeah, Ivan Lemare's Last of Us Zane's book tops Lord of the Rings. It's a better written story than Lord of the Rings. I was a lot more entertained. I was a lot more hooked. The characters kept me more hooked. The story is more interesting than Lord of the Rings, because I have the gift. As Last of Us Zane's is the best fantasy story ever written. Obviously. Hence why I'm going to make my billions. Meanwhile, I'm going to make $9 billion off the book sales. Off the royalties, obviously. Lulu will make a good, I don't know, 6.5 billion, 6.8 billion. I'll make a good 9.5 billion, and PayPal will take a good like $400 million of my royalties. And that's why I don't want Amazon doing any deal like that, where they take a percentage percentage off the payments. I'm gonna say, look, you get a flat 40%, I get a flat 60%. No ifs, ands, or buts. You get 40% for all the markets, a flat 40%. I get a flat 60%, no more, no less. That's my final offer. If you're greedy and you don't want to do business with me, I'll just release my movie online and I make more profit off online anyways. I don't have to worry about shipping. Which Amazon will obviously agree. And again, stay tuned for my Swimming with the Sharks video. I'm going on 14 minutes, so I'll start reading. Stay tuned for my Swimming with the Sharks video, looking at a very interesting video for that. And remember, do not let the Hollywood actors dupe you, as none of them are worth you and your rights royalties. There's no such thing as back-end deals from me and my wife Skysource Company. I'm going to be very strict. Look, man, if the actors' agents try and get a piece of royalties, the big ones, I'm going to tell their agents, look, Amazon's already taking a big chunk of the pie. They're taking 40% of my royalties, when in reality they're only worth like 30%. But because I'm nice, I'm willing to give them 40%, considering they have a lot of costs. They have a lot of overhead costs. And so I'm willing to pay them a lot of money, give them a large piece of the royalties. I'm like, Amazon's already taking a good chunk of the pie. I'm investing hundreds of millions of dollars towards my movie. I'm paying your salary. I'm feeding you. I'm accommodating you. I'm paying me more for paying all the fucking bills. No way in hell am I going to give you 1%, 0.5% of the royalties, as you're not worth it. Amazon's already taking 40%. I'm not going to give you 1% of the royalties, and you take home like $120 million. And now, instead of making, I don't know, 60%, I make like 57%. No way, man. Everything in my company is a front end deal. There's no such thing as back end deals for my company. I'm going to be very strict on that. Again, stay tuned for that very interesting topic in my Swim with the Sharks video, which I'll be making in a good 2 weeks from now. I'll make the video on September 30th. I'll make the video when I get my last check. When I get my last check, around that time, I don't know, September 29th, 28th, September 30th. Around the time I get my check, I'll make that Swimming with the Sharks video. Looking at a very interesting video for that. Now let me stop babbling on. Let me start reading. Let me continue chapter 3 of what? Of Lord of the Rings. So to quickly reiterate, what happened in the last half of chapter 3? Obviously, right? So it's pretty much about Frodo. So Gandalf speaks to Frodo in the end of Volume 2. Samwise Gamgee's eavesdropping. Gandalf tells Frodo he has to leave the Shire because the forces of Sauron are suspicious of the ring's whereabouts, obviously. And now Frodo, chapter 3 is pretty much what? Frodo, Sam, and Pippin getting ready to leave the Shire. Frodo has to come up with a good excuse to leave the Shire. So he's saying he's going to Bucklebury. That's what Samwise Gamgee's dad said, obviously. And now they're getting ready to leave the Shire, pretty much. So chapter 3 is pretty much about Frodo, Sam, and Pippin. They're preparing to leave the Shire. Because all that other stuff about Frodo selling his possessions to Saruman is useless information. So I'm not going to mention that. Chapter 3, what I've read so far, is pretty much Frodo, Sam, and Pippin preparing to leave the Shire. And again, all that is all cut out in the book, as you don't get in the movie, and you don't see any of that in the movie, obviously. Let me continue where I read here, okay? So I'll read a good 10 pages and I'll end the video here. Right? The gate in the lane beyond the meadows. We're not going through the village tonight. Too many ears pricking and eyes prying. Sam ran off at full speed. Well, now we're off at last, said Frodo. They shouldered their packs and took up their sticks and walked round the corner to the west side of Bag End. Goodbye, said Frodo, looking at the dark black windows. He waved his hands and then turned and, following Bilbo if he had known it, hurried after Peregrine down the garden path. So now Sam and Frodo and Merry and Pippin are saying their last goodbyes to the Shire. They're getting ready to leave the Shire, obviously. Again, if I comment and make an error, Lord of the Rings fans, you gotta bear with me, as I'm not well grounded in Lord of the Rings compared to you smart nerds, obviously, right? Goodbye, said Frodo, looking at the dark black windows. He waved his hand and then turned, and following Bilbo if he had known it, hurried after Peregrine down the garden path. They jumped over the low place in the ledge at the bottom and took to the fields, passing into the darkness like a rustle in the grass. So now they're leaving the Shire, obviously, right? At the bottom of the hill on its western side, they came to the gate opening on its narrow lane. There they halted and adjusted the straps of their packs. Presently Sam appeared, trotting quickly and breathing hard. His heavy pack was hoisted high on his shoulders, and he had put on his head a tall, shapeless felt bag, which he called a hat. In the gloom he looked very much like a dwarf. I am sure you have given me all the heavy stuff, said Frodo. I pity snails, and all that carry their homes on their backs. Right? I could take a lot more. So right now, J.R.R. Tolkien is describing the bags and hats that they're wearing, that kind of stuff, right? I could take a lot more, yet, sir. My pack is quite light, said Sam, stoutly and untruthfully. No, you don't, Sam, said Pippin. So you see, Pippin is with Sam and Frodo when they leave the Shire, and they meet Merry along the way, whereas in the movie, Pippin and Merry appear out of nowhere in Farmer Maggot's crops, which is very weird, obviously. I told you, there's like 80% difference with the book and the movie. And you see what I mean when I'm reading you the passage. None of this is in the movie, man. It's all cut out. Peter Jackson cut it all out, man. Right? No, you don't, Sam, said Pippin. It is good for him. He's got nothing except what he ordered us to pack. He's been slack lately, and he'll feel the weight less when he's walked off some of his own. Be kind to a poor old hobbit, laughed Frodo. I shall be as sin as Will Wan. I am sure before I get to Buckland that I was talking nonsense. I suspect you have taken more than your share, Sam, and I shall look into it at our next packing. He picked up his stick again. Well, we all liked walking in the dark, he said. So let's put some miles behind us before bed. For a short way they followed the lane westwards. Then, leaving it, they turned left and took quietly to the fields again. So this chapter is pretty much them walking and talking, pretty much. Hence why the first half of Fellowship of the Ring is very boring. The first half, you're going to have to bear with the following chapters, you're going to have to bear with me, as it's pretty much just about Frodo, Sam, and Pippin walking and talking. That's pretty much what it is, pretty much. So this chapter is pretty boring, obviously. You have to bear with me here. Right. They went in single file along hedgerows and the borders of coppices, whatever that is, right? A night fell dark about them. In their dark cloaks, they were as visible as if they all had magic rings. Since they were all hobbits and were trying to be silent, they made no noise that even hobbits would hear. Even the wild things in the fields and woods hardly noticed their passing. After some time, they crossed the water west of Hobbiton by a narrow plank bridge. The stream was there no more than a winding black ribbon, bordered with leaning alder trees. A mile or two further south, they hastily crossed the great road from the Brandywine Bridge. They were now in the Tookland, and bending southeastwards, they made for the Green Hill country. So Gerard Tolkien's describing their journey pretty much, right, from the Shire. As they began to climb its first slopes, they looked back and saw the lamps in Hobbiton, far off twinkling in the gentle valley of the water. Soon it disappeared in the folds of the darkened land and was followed by Bywater beside its great pool. When the light of the last farm was far behind, peeping among the trees, Frodo turned and waved a hand in the farewell. I wonder if I'll ever look down into that valley again, he said quietly. So Frodo, on their journey, when they cross the bridge and all that stuff, right, whatever the name of the bridge is, Frodo is reluctant. He's wondering if him and his hobbit, him and his friends are ever going to return, make it out alive in their journey, obviously, because he knows it's a dangerous road to Rivendell, obviously, right? I wonder if I shall ever look down in that valley again, he said quietly. Right. When they had walked for about 3 hours, they rested. The night was clear, cool, and starry, but smoke like wisps of mist were creeping up the hillsides from the streams and deep meadows. Thin-clad birches swaying in a light wind above their heads made a black net against the pale sky. And this is all what? Info dumps, right? Useless info dumps. Blah, 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 right? They ate a frugal supper for hobbits and then went on again. Soon they struck a narrow road and went rolling up and down, fading gray into the dark ahead. The road to Woodhall and Stock and Buckleberry Ferry. He climbed away from the main road in the water valley and went over the skirts of the green hills towards the woody end, a wild corner of the East Farthing. After a while, they plunged into a deeply cloven track between all tall trees that rustled their dry leaves in the night. It was very dark. At first, they talked or hummed a tune softly together, being now far away from inquisitive ears. Right. Then they marched on in silence. This is all useless information, right? Then they marched on in silence, and Pippin began to lag behind. At last, as they began to climb a steep slope, he stopped and yawned. I am so sleepy, he said, that soon I shall fall down on the road. So Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin have been walking for a long time, and Pippin's getting tired, obviously. Are you going to sleep on your legs? It is nearly midnight. I thought you liked walking in the dark, said Frodo, but there is no great hurry. Mary expects us sometime the day after tomorrow, but that leaves us nearly 2 days. Yeah, so they do meet Mary along the way. I was right. Right? Mary expects us sometime the day after tomorrow, but that leaves us nearly 2 days more. Well, halt at the first valley likely spot, right? The wind's in the west, said Sam. If we get to the other side of this hill, we shall find a spot that's sheltered and snug enough, sir. There's a dry fir wood. You might hear the noise upstairs, my stepmother. There's a dry fir wood just ahead. If I remember rightly, Sam knew the land well, within 20 miles of Hobbiton. But that was a limit of his geography. Obviously. So Sam and Frodo know a little bit about the geography outside of the Shire, obviously, but not that much, obviously. Just over the top of the hill, they came to on the patch of the firwood. Leaving the road, they went into a deep, resonant darkness of the trees and gathered dead sticks and cones to make a fire. Soon they had a merry crackle of flame at the foot of a large fir tree, and they sat around it for a while until they began to nod. Then each in the angle of great tree roots, they curled up their cloaks and blankets and were soon fast asleep. They set no watch. Even Frodo feared no danger yet, for they were still in the heart of the Shire. A few creatures came and looked at them when the fire had died away. A fox passing through the wood on business of his own stopped several minutes and sniffed. This is not in the movie, right? So Frodo and Sam and them made a campfire, obviously, and they saw a fox, obviously. Hobbits, he thought. Well, what next? I have heard of strange doings in these lands, but I have seldom heard of a hobbit sleeping out of doors under a tree. 3 of them. There's something mighty queer behind this. He was quite right, but he never found out any more about it. The morning came, pale and clammy. Frodo woke up first and found that a tree root had made a hole in his back, and that his neck was sick. Remember that scene in the movie, in the special editions, when Frodo and Sam see the elves? And they're leaving Middle Earth. They're going to the Grey Havens. They mentioned the Grey Havens, right? Remember when Sam complains about a root Every time I sleep, I lie down, I feel a root tree stuck on my back. And Frodo's like, just close your eyes, Sam. And he closes his eyes. Well, that's where Peter Jackson got this idea from, obviously, right? The morning came pale and clammy. Frodo woke up first and found that a tree root had made a hole in his back, and that his neck was stiff. Walking for pleasure, why didn't I drive? He thought, as usually at the beginning of an expedition. And all my beautiful feather beds are sold to the Sackville Bagginses. Remember how Frodo sold his possessions to the Sackville Bagginses? Remember how he said in chapter 1 how the Sackville Bagginses wanted his wealth? Well, Frodo sold a lot of his possessions to the Sackville Bagginses, obviously. These tree roots would do them good, he stretched. Wake up, hobbits, he cried. It's a beautiful morning. What's beautiful about? Said Pippin, peering over the edge of his blanket with one eye. Sam, get breakfast ready for 9:30. Have you got the bath water hot? Sam jumped up, looking rather bleary. No, sir, I haven't, sir, he said. Frodo stripped the blankets from Pippin and rolled him over, and then walked off to the edge of the wood, away east where the sun was rising red out of the mist that lay thick on the world. Right. Touched with gold and red, the autumn trees seemed to be sailing rootless in a shadowy sea. A little below him, to the left, the road ran down steeply into a hollow and disappeared. When he returned, Sam and Pippin had got a good fire going. Water, shouted Pippin. Where's the water? I don't keep water in my pockets, said Frodo. We thought you had gone to find some, said Pippin, busy setting out the food and cups. So they're getting ready to having breakfast, obviously, right? You had better go now. You can come too, said Frodo, and bring all the water bottles. There was a stream at the foot of the hill. They filled their bottles in the small camping kettle at a little fall where the water fell a few feet over an outcrop of Greystone. Again, this is not in the movie. See what I'm saying when I said the movie's different than the book? It's 80% difference. Yeah, man. It was icy cold and they spluntered and puffed as they bathed their faces and hands. When their breakfast was over and their packs all thrust up again, it was after 10 o'clock and the day was beginning to turn fine and hot. They went down the slope and across the stream where it dived under the road. This is all useless information, right? And up the next slope and up and down another shoulder of the hills. And by that time, their cloaks, blankets, water, food, and other gear already seemed a heavy burden. The day's march promised to be warm and tiring work. After some miles, however, the road ceased to roll up and down. He climbed to the top of the steep bank, right, in a wary zigzagging sort of way, and then prepared to go down for the last time. In front of them they saw the lower lands dotted with small clumps of trees, and that melted away in the distance to a brown wooden haze, blah blah blah, right? They were looking across the woody ends towards the Brandywine River. The road would away before them like a piece of string. The road goes on forever, said Pippin, but I can't without rest. It's high time for lunch. He sat down on the bank. So pretty much chapter 3 is pretty much about Frodo and Sam and Pippin. They're preparing to leave the Shire. It talks about their journey their journey from the Shire to Rivendell. When they wake up, they get water, they set up camp for breakfast. You know what I'm saying? It's pretty much their journey. Useless info dumps, right? Their journey, pretty much. They were looking across the woody end towards the Brandywine River, right? They were journeying to breathe, they're journeying to Rivendell, all that stuff. That's pretty much. And the first half of the Fellowship Ring is a huge drag, man. It's really boring. They were looking across the woody end towards the Brandywine River. The road wound away before them like a piece of string. The road goes on forever, said Pippin. But I can't without rest. It is time for lunch. Again, this is not in the movie, right? He sat down on the bank at the side of the road and looked away east into the haze, beyond which lay the river, and the end of the Shire in which he had spent all his life. Sam stood by him. His round eyes were wide open. He was looking across lands he had never seen to a new horizon. So Sam and Pippin have never been outside the Shire, pretty much. And now that they're close to being outside the borders of the Shire, they're in awe, obviously. Because I told you, the hobbits are like cut off from the outside world. Do elves live in those woods, he asked. Not that I have ever heard, said Pippin. Frodo was silent. He too was gazing eastward on the road, as if he had never seen it before. Suddenly he spoke aloud, but as if to himself, saying slowly, "The road goes on ever on and on down from the door where they began." Bilbo sang that song in the movie when he leaves. Well, that's where Peter Jackson got this idea from, obviously, and he sang the same song in chapter 1, one that I read earlier, right? The road goes on, ever on and on, down from the door where it begun. Now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow if I can, pursuing it with wary feet until it joins some larger way, where many passing errands meet, and whither then I cannot say. That sounds a bit like old Bilbo's rhyming, said Pippin. Or it is one of your imitations. It does not sound altogether encouraging. I don't know, said Frodo. It came to me then as if I was making it up, but I may have heard it long ago. Certainly, it reminds me very much of Bilbo in the last years. Because don't forget, Bilbo left the Shire 17 years ago, right? And he sang that song when he left with the three dwarves, right? Certainly, it reminds me very much of Bilbo in the last years before he went away. He used often to say there was only one road, that was like a great river. Its springs were at every corner, every doorstep. Every path was its tributary. It's dangerous business, Frodo, going out of your door, he used to say. You step into the road, and if you don't, see, remember in the movie when Sam was down, and Frodo says, "Remember what Bilbo used to say," and then Bilbo says, "If you're going out of your door, you step into the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you might step off to." Remember how Peter Jackson put that scene? Peter Jackson put that dialogue speech in the movie, obviously, right? Do you realize this is the very path that goes through Mirkwood, and that if you let it, it might take you to lonely mountains, or even further and to worse places? He used to say that on the path outside the front door at Bag End, especially after he had been out for a long walk. Well, the road won't sweep me anywhere for an hour at least, said Pippin, unslinging his pack. The others followed his example, putting their packs against the bank and their legs out onto the road. After the rest, they had a good lunch, and then more rest. So it's pretty much, so chapter 3 is pretty much Frodo, Pippin, Merry, Sam. They're leaving the Shire. They're leaving the borders of the Shire, and they meet people. They pretty much walk, talk, and meet people along the way. They meet Merry. They meet Faramaggot. They meet Tom Bombadil, Goldberry. They meet all these people. I'm gonna show my camera up here.